Well,
What's vortex mean?
vortex got to do with the way it makes the air go in there. That's not too hard to figure out. You can pretty well figure it out by thinking about vortex, because you think about a vortex, but if you say Triton, you're thinking about maybe something to do with some mythological Poseidon or something like that. I don't know why they chose to call that. Okay, but let's move with this thing right here now. The flatness of the cylinder head deck, and this is engine repair test, or engine principles test 5 more or less. The flatness of the cylinder head deck is checked by using a depth gauge and a micrometer.
The micrometer is what you use to tell if the cylinder needs to be bored or homed or whatever.
Well, yes or no. I mean, if you got yes, sort of, but basically, it depends on what kind of micrometer you're talking about. There's inside mics and outside mics and all that. The inside mic is, it's got little contact points on each end, and you dial it out and all that. But that's not the best way to measure a cylinder. The best way to measure a cylinder, they got a tool, cylinder bore gauge, and it's got 3 contact points on one side and 1 on the back. And you just rock it till it's in the center, and you read it real fast. I mean, just bam, you've got the reading real quick. Do we have one of those here? No, we do not. I may get one, but we don't have one yet. But we do have a ridge reamer, which I haven't used in 8 years because I haven't seen a ridge in any cylinder that we've, But one anyway. And you know how you teach somebody to use a ridge reamer? You got to have a cylinder that's got ridge in it so you can ream. And I don't see ridges anymore because of low tension rings and everything. They don't make ridges much anymore. Measurements of engine components. Incidentally, the flatness of the cylinder head is done with a straight edge and a feeler gauge. So that's how you do that. Back and forth. And so that first one is actually big fat false. Okay, the next question. Measurements of engine components are in metric units or USC.
What's USC?
US.
I thought so.
American Imperial. Like that. And so tell me the difference.
One's done another.
I mean, how you like? Give me an example of a metric measurement when you're measuring clearances.
Clearances?
Yeah, like a clearance, like for instance, on your when we plastic gauge that rod journal,
it was
whatever
in,
you would
thousandths of an inch.
It was at thousandths of an inch. And remember what it was?
It was 2,000.
Just under 2 thousandths, which is at the outer limit. I didn't see any copper on the bearing, so we said, well, we're going to go. And we go, the main bearings was a daggum bed plate. And that which is a pain. All the main bearings are made together. Yeah, and it was something else. But anyway, the fact was, he shut that thing down before he caused himself any problems. He caught it quick. I mean, he caught it because somebody the day before had told him, hey, you better watch that 4.7 because it may starve for oil. And he saw oil pressure starting to drop. He killed it. And sure enough, we had it clogging, in our screen.
So is that like a factory issue with that thing?
It's probably related to the way the PCB system is designed on it. Toyota, back in the late 90s and the early O's, had issues with their PCB system, and some of their engines would sludge up just no matter how you drove them or anything else. And they replaced a bunch of those engines under factory warranty as part of the program. Now, you understand how recalls and stuff work, right? A recall is forever. If you can drag a Renault Alliance out of the junkyard and do a heater core recall on it if you're an authorized dealer, even if it's been in the junkyard for 15 years, because there's a certain number of them has to be done as federal thing. A program means that these head gaskets have a tendency to get water in the cylinder on some of them, so we've got to check them for this, which is the dumbest thing that Ford did, and I guess they did it just to satisfy the EPA. They had us checking the compression on a lot of these Windstars and Tauruses and stuff that had 3.8s in them, because they figured we'll check the compression and that's going to satisfy. Well, checking the compression is not going to tell you if you got coolant getting into the cylinder. But that's what the recall called for, and we would have to check. Imagine this: if they hand you a ticket for a Windstar, Windstar is a minivan, and the engine's in there sideways, and the plugs on the backside are sort of a booger to get to, unless you developed the technique like I did. And you had to pull all the plugs out, do a compression on all 6 cylinders. And some of these guys would have a tendency to cheat and just do the compression test on the front bank, Well, the thing about it was, their rationale was, you can check the compression and that's fine, But even if you do have water getting in the cylinder, that doesn't tell you anything, right? Now let's talk about how you determine that you're getting water in the cylinder. You know how to do that. You start an engine. You ever start an engine and it runs rough when you first start it, and then it cleans up its act? You know what I'm saying? You're going to run into that sooner or later. If you stay in this business, and I'm sure that Brandon's probably seen it. I mean, for various different reasons, it's going to go. You crank it up, either hot or cold or something. It's skipping dead away, and then it clears up. Well, if you want to find that, the way you do that, the way you make that happen, is you crank it up, and while it's still skipping, before it cleans up its act, you shut that thing off, and you get every doggone spark plug out of it just as quick as you can. Now, if you started it cold and it's skipping, and then cleans up its act, it's probably pushing some coolant into the combustion chamber, wets the spark plug, and then when it gets the spark plug dried off, it starts hitting, and there's not enough coolant going in there to where you lose very much of it. Now listen, because this is going to stand you in good stead, Chelsea. All right, so what we got here is when you pull the plug out, if it's steaming, then your job is over. Now you can get your borescope and look down in there and, see if you see coolant and all that kind of thing. Cracked cylinder head will do that too. You see that sometimes. But on those 3.8s, I'm talking about the head gaskets in it. On my Jeep, cylinder number 3, apparently it's got a cracked cylinder head or blown gasket or something, because whenever I drive it really, really hot summer, don't do it any other time of the year, but if it's super, super hot outside and it's running about 220, I switch that thing off, go in Winn-Dixie, come back out, and my check engine light starts flashing, and I get SP0303 code, and I take my little cheap scan tool out of the console, plug it in, clear the daggum code, so I ain't got to look at that light, and then I go home.
And you also get where you pull that plug out and you just see it's just drenched in motor oil.
Yeah,
where
sometimes.
the inner tube is leaking oil into the cylinder.
If you've got valve stem seals leaking, it'll just see that kind of thing. Of course, valve stem seals will make them ice cream stuff too. Hey, there you go. All right, so the long and the short of it is, let's say that you've got one that when you park it hot, it does this. Like that, and that's where I'm going. In some cases, it'll be a dripping injector. And what I did on that was, I'd pull the plugs out, and while it was skipping, I'd switch it off. I'd pull the plugs out, and one of them would be sooty. And I'd say, aha. So I pull the fuel injectors, and one of the injectors, the tip of it would be clean as a whistle. And it just so happened to be the same one that had the sooty plug. So if it's got that gas dribbling out all the time, it's going to wash off the end of that injector. The end of the injector will be cruddy looking like everything else in the end. If it's clean, there's a problem. It sounds like, counterintuitive. If it's clean, that sounds good, but you got a problem if it's clean. Anyway, I sort of got off on a rabbit trail. The measurements of engine components are made in metric units or USC, and that is true. Okay, now number 3 is dye penetrant inspection can be used on non-magnetic material as well as on magnetic material, and that's obviously true. One time, talking about engine repair, George had this same guy that owned his red van that we got out here that you reset the light on, Chelsea, remember that just a while ago? Got this Dodge Stratus, and 98 model. The daughter lives in Tallahassee. She goes down there to a shop somewhere because she's got an oil leak. And so, turns out that they said it's going to have a rear main seal, and it's going to be $1,000. And he's like, wow, this is a lot of money. And so George says, why don't you let him look at it at school, because he was a psychology instructor at the time, on a counselor. So brought it up here. We cleaned everything up pretty good to start with, and then we poured some dye in it, in the engine, raised it up, fired it up. Well, we drove it down the road. Excuse me, you had to drive it. It said 4-cylinder in it. Bring it up in the air, we go under there, and it's leaking from the corner of the cylinder head on the back side. Now it's running down here, dripping off the bell housing, so you might think of anything. But what the shops do, some of them, that didn't troubleshoot it right, we actually put a head gasket on it to fix that. And what the shops do is they do their silly repair and put the rear main seal in it that they found out wasn't leaking and all that. And then they say, well, we got some of it, but we didn't get all of it. Now we've got to put a head gasket on it. It's going to be another $1,000. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so the whole deal I'm trying to teach you guys is it's really good to make sure as much as you can that you know what's wrong before you commit to any parts. If the water pump's leaking, you need a water pump. That's not rocket science. You know what I mean? But what really makes you feel bad is when you misdiagnose and it costs somebody extra money you know. And I tell you something else though. That one time I put a fuel pump in a Taurus. We were throwing fuel pumps in some of them cars back whenever they didn't have lubricant in the gasoline. These high pressure fuel pumps would wear out and they'd get noisy and not work. And then sometimes they just die, or if the brushes would wear out and they wouldn't run and all that kind of stuff. And I would take my my test light and go and I'd unhook the fuel pump relay. And I'd hook it to the hot side of the fuel pump relay and I'd touch the wire that was going to the fuel pump. It didn't light up. I know I had open brushes on the fuel pump, especially if I kicked the gas tank, a light came on. And so all this. But anyway, sometimes if you kick the gas tank, it didn't come on. If I didn't see that and the inertia switch wasn't tripped, I'd say, well, we got a fuel pump problem. So I threw a fuel pump in this Taurus. I mean, it didn't take no time. And it's just like it was. Well, I've changed 478,212 fuel pumps and I've never had this before. What's up with it? And then I found out right there where the wire's plugged in there at the battery, you know, them two big ground wires come out of them older Tauruses. The ground wires were chalky. They look good, but when you unplug them, they were a chalky mess. And that ground was in a roundabout way, if I remember right, what happened. Or either that, I can't remember that, or signed to the PCM ground or something. One way or another, that ground was why it wouldn't start. It wasn't the fuel pump, but my test led me to think it was the fuel pump. I see, so the test, it was reliable all the times I ever done it with that. And I'm thinking it's a good test. So, whatever. Now let's go back down here now. Cylinder head deck must be cleaned with an abrasive pad on a drill or a grinder to remove corrosion or rust. Yeah. That's actually false. You're not supposed to do that anymore on most of them. A cylinder head deck. Now, what are you talking about when you say cylinder head deck? What are you thinking?
Mating surface where the head gasket sits.
Yeah, the part on the block or the, whatever. If it's aluminum, you better not go there, because you're going to have some issues. You're not even supposed to use a metal scraper on aluminum. I mean, let's be honest. Most of us do. You know what I mean? You're not supposed to use metal scraper, metal scraper, but if you're careful with it, you can
just use a razor blade.
The razor blade works. Whatever happens, and you feel of it with your fingers and all that.
Guys going over with the buzz wheels, especially like the orange heavy grit, that always just.
Oh yeah, make a mess.
Lord have mercy,
guys. Anytime you do that on aluminum, the white bristle disc, the 3M bristle disc, it works pretty good with aluminum, but you can even overdo it with that one. You got to be really careful. So just be careful with that. And some of these guys would use these abrasive 3M discs. It looked like sort of like steel wool, but it wasn't steel. You know what I'm talking about? I don't know what you call them.
I'm thinking about the red 3M disc.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's what I mean. But back when I worked at Lincoln Mercury in the early 80s, there was a bunch of programs. And what I started to say a while ago, a program is cut off after a certain mileage. In other words, if it's got less than 100,000 miles and it's got this problem, we'll replace it. If it's over 100,000 miles, you're on your own. So that's the difference between a recall and a program. And they got different kind of recalls. They got emission recalls, they got safety recalls, this kind of thing. All right, so one way or another, these tempos had just come out. And I mean, they would actually, what they would do is they'd leak oil down the front of the block. Now the Tempo engine was really cool because it was cast iron, had a cast iron cylinder head. Is this one I'm supposed to take? Huh?
I forgot the other one.
Well, second-rate amateur and all that stuff. All right. I gotta pay this guy. Somebody needs to. But anyway, what I'm gonna say is, these other mechanics, these older guys, didn't want to work on those tempos. They didn't like front-wheel drive because it just come out. They didn't like sideways engines, and so I had just gone to work over there. And would you do me a favor and please get me my checkbook out of the glove box in my truck? You'll see I got to write this guy a check. But so anyway, what I found out was I could take the brace loose from the back of the cylinder head. I could pull the valve cover off. I could take the loosen the rocker arm to get the push rods out of there. And I could take all them head bolts out and just put them on the bench over there. Then I could take the chain fall, which was on the long thing that was over, kind of like we got over there. And except this one here was one of these. He's bringing the checkbook so I can pay you up.
All right. Let me go get the 30 ready.
Is this $55 a month now? Wow. Anyway, so the long and short of it was, I could raise that cylinder head up about 2 inches and pull that cylinder head gasket out like a business card because it didn't have no glue of anything. It was a brand new engine, and I could feel of it under there. And whenever I felt of it under there, if it didn't have anything on it on the head or on the top, what I'd do is I'd put a new gasket under there, which had some gummy stuff on it to keep it from leaking, and I would lower it. And once I got it lowered, I'd put them bolts back in it and buckle everything up and That job paid 3.5 hours as a program, and I could do it in 45 minutes. I did a bunch of those things. If you can find a way to do it where you're legitimately doing the repair, the worst thing you can do is tell the manufacturer, hey, I can do this faster than that, because you know what they do? They cut everybody's time.
And if you're ever at a school and you got a technician bragging to the instructors about how quick he can do something, at break, tell him to stop.
Yeah,
Say, look, we understand you're a great technician. Stop.
Talking about a factory school.
Because then instructors say, show me what you're doing here.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, everybody that's used to getting paid 6 hours for changing a differential in such and such a transmission is now getting paid 2.
And they'll make a video. Do it this way now.
Yeah. How much is my amount there?
55.
55. Well, that should be really hard for me to remember. 55 and 55. You know what I ought to do? I ought to take those old uniforms that Gene hung in there for spares and get my ASC patches put on those and just wash them at home, and then I can save $55 a month.
Do what you gotta do.
Yeah. And the uniform people says, why did you do this? I said, the uniform man told me you guys were too high, and I needed to. Sorry about that.
Now, you're talking about that uniform. I mean, these pants here you buy for $4.
Yeah.
The used ones.
Yeah.
And this, if you ever have a shop, because linen expenses are very expensive, but they're $4 for these. I went and bought the shirts. Sometimes they'll even have the used shirts, and you can just get your name patches on them. The reason why I never had the tech patches because you got to buy them, and I was too cheap. But saved you a bunch of money because linen service most of the time they charge a minimum like $15 weekly fee to come by. Then you got to pay for your towels and uniforms. And I found it was cheaper. In my case, I just bought like 100 shop towels from Advance because you can get them for like $12. And we would just, if they got oil soaked, we'd let them sit overnight and dry out. I actually had a dedicated $50 washing machine with purple stuff. Yeah. And it just was sit. But a little trick like that when you have a shop.
My dad was cheaper than that. He had a cast iron wash pot he'd build a fire under, and he washed his shop rags like that. Put that back there if you don't mind. All right. Yeah. Oh, did you lock it back up? Okay. Sorry about that. All right. Okay, let's move on down here so we can get back out into the shop because we have lots of hard work we got to do today. Particularly Brandon. Brandon has got hard work. He's got. We got to work Brandon really hard today. Make sure Brandon works hard.
We'll make sure Brandon does the rest of that Dodge engine all by himself and then puts it in all by himself. And he can't use the assistance of the engine hoist. He's got to pick that engine up.
He's got to pick the engine up, put it in my hand. There you go. I heard his back a little bit.
Yeah. Hey, John, that Dodge motor over there, my inline 6 motor in my race car weighs more than that Dodge motor does, I promise you.
Yeah, you're probably right. All right, you got your, now you got your telescoping gauge is most often used where a dowel bore gauge will not fit. Do you guys know what a telescoping gauge is?
That's like the thing you showed me the other day, right?
It's like a T.
Same thing as a borescope.
Not really. A telescoping gauge is like a T, and I got some in there. And you tighten the handle on this thing, and these little spring-loaded T. When you stick it down in there, you loosen it a little bit, and it's click. It snaps
and it
out.
goes. Okay.
Yeah,
I know
and then whatever. Yeah, you've seen it.
I got a bunch of them.
You got that's the telescoping gauge. But if you can't fit a dowel bore gauge in there, you're gonna have to use that because they got various different ones. A straight edge should be handled with care and used only for checking for distortion.
So number what?
That's number 7.
Number
6 was true.
You mean number 5 and number 6?
Yeah, 5 is actually going to be true, 4 is false. Okay, number 8.
Hold on, man, you're going way ahead of yourself. We don't know.
Number 11 is C. 10 is true, 8 is false, 9 is false, 1 is false, 3 is true. Are you confused now? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Really. So where are you guys at now? You're at 7, right?
6.
Okay, 6 is actually going to be a true statement, which would be straight edge should be handled with care and only used for checking distortion. Do not use my straight edge for a pry bar. Okay, we're not going to play that game. You know what a straight edge looks like?
Somebody did that.
It's a straight piece of metal. It's machined perfectly, and it costs about $100. And you use it to measure.
It's got levels in it.
Huh?
It's got levels in it.
No, not really. The straight edge is it's just a piece of steel. You know, you're just going to have your cylinder head laying on a bench, and you're going to go back and forth and round and about. But anyway, we're moving on. You and Brandon have learned a ton on that Dodge you've been working on over there. I posted that picture on Facebook.
Yeah, my mom asked me, was that me? I was like, no, that ain't me.
Yeah, it is.
Recognize your own son.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all she could see was your blue jeans and your
Yeah,
hand.
she saw that hoodie and she was like, "Is that you?" I was like, "No, Mom, that's not me in the hoodie."
Well, most pictures, she's having to look from here down because his head's above all the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, she saw like a picture, like she saw like this much is Sean in the picture. And she was like, "Well, who's this dude over here? Look like he's like modeling or something." I was like, "The dude."
Well, that is, you maybe you get away with something because she can recognize you in a picture.
Yeah, I know.
All right. So, careful inspection and measuring of engine components is more likely to be done by a repair technician than an automotive machine shop.
That's true.
That's false. You know, machine shop measures every darn thing, big time.
What was 7?
You know.
Well, I've had one not do that before.
Plastic gauge. You guys used plastic gauge yesterday. Can be used to determine the clearance between crankshaft bearing and the journal. That is the most accurate way to make that happen. Now, one time, years ago, when I was working at Bondi's, I had a Chevy Citation. Now, I never understood why people would bring a Chevy or an Oldsmobile or a doggone Honda to the Ford place. It didn't make no sense to me, but they did. And so I was up under there, and I had to put a crankshaft kit in this Citation. So I yanked the transmission out of the doggone thing, and I took all the, everything, and belts and all that nonsense off, torque converter, flywheel, and I pulled the crankshaft with the motor in the car. And I popped that thing back up in there. You can do that, if you're particular. All right, so you push the pistons all up out of the way.
My dad's car.
Yeah, and you can put it up in there. So I put it all back together. The crank kit comes with bearings, right? It's a machine crankshaft. It's been usually machine 10 under, and you've got, 10 thousandths bearings, or they'll be stamped on the back. It'll say that. Put it all together. Fired it up. Of course, I didn't see any point in plastic gauge. It's a crank kit. I didn't mean the bearing, So we put it all back together, fired it up, and this doggone thing had main bearing noise. Pull the doggone pan off of it. Look, everything was torqued right and all that sort of stuff. Now, if you're going to plastic gauge the main bearings with the vehicle, with the crankshaft in the car, you got to realize that the weight of the crankshaft is going to squish the plastic gauge and make your reading not accurate. You got that? So what you got to do is you got to get next to the main bearing journal next to it. You got to pull that one off and put a business card in there or something, and tighten it up so it'll hold the crankshaft, right? So you're going to read all of your clearance, put the plastic gauge on, tighten it up, and I had way too much clearance. Like
From
a crankshaft kit, that we bought. So we pulled the crankshaft out. This was kind of dingy, but the decision was made. We were trying to keep from having to, I don't know why we didn't just but the machine shop that sold us the crank kit machined it 9 thousandths of an inch, and it gave us some 20 thousandths bearings. We're just trying to shooting in the dark, and it still had too much clearance. In other words, we didn't crank it back up. We actually measured it, and it had too much clearance. And we were scratching our heads about that. And finally, the shop foreman says, just take the main bearing caps and file them a little bit and put the darn thing back together so it'll have good clearance. When you file them a little bit, that takes up some of your clearance. You just file them a little, you don't file a lot. And you file them and you put them up and remeasure, and you get them all to where they're less than 1.5 thousandths, you're in Fat City. And
That
that's where I
took a
wound
while,
up.
didn't it?
Huh?
It took a while, didn't it?
Yeah. Except for I was a fast filer. All right, so. But anyhow, I made it all happen, and that one was gone. But I worked on that doggone thing for a solid week trying to get straightened out. All right. But anyway, but sometimes everybody's just, it wasn't anything I was doing wrong, but I was getting smacked around on that one. And occasionally you get smacked around on one. Ain't that right, Chelsea? Supercharger belt do that to you, don't it? You have a good time with that? All right. All right, number 7. Were you here when she was doing that the other day? Yeah, you were. You were here when she was fooling that supercharger belt. All right, so careful inspection and measuring, Regular micrometers allow the user to read the measurement directly, while digital micrometers require the user to calibrate the measurement. That is backwards. A digital micrometer is like a calculator in your hand. When you're in math class, it makes you dumb. You know what I mean? It just makes you dumb. That's okay. If you want to get a digital micrometer, you got my blessing. You go for it. As long as you get the numbers, that's all you care. But I will tell you this, somewhere up here, I have got a digital Dowel indicator that is useless for anything except measuring something like backlash. Don't. That's really cool. I don't know where that thing is. I got to find it. But, a lot of times when we're turning something through and checking for run out, and all you got is black numbers on a little screen change, that's worthless. You're not going to be able to tell how much. I want to see a needle moving if I'm doing Dowel. Okay, now let's move on. Excessive crankshaft run out may indicate a bent crankshaft. Now that's true. You know what run out is? Does anybody not know what
I don't
run out is?
understand exactly what it is.
Okay,
but
run out means that it's not spinning true. It's doing this instead of spinning. Like on your tire, have you ever put a tire on a tire machine to balance it? I mean on the, not the tire machine, but the balance machine to balance it, and you spin it, and the tire, when you look at it, the tire is, instead of turning, it's turning like it's a little egg shape. That's lateral run out. And that's kind of what they're talking about. I'm sorry, not lateral, excuse me, radial run out. That's radial run out. Lateral run out is whenever it's going back and forth when it's turning. See what I'm saying? So any kind of run out means that it is not staying within the boundary it should. I was talking to the guy on that machine over where we turn brake rotors. And I said, what kind of run out are we allowed to have on this shaft, this arbor for this brake? He said 1/1000th of an inch you're allowed to have, no more than that. So I set up a dial indicator and I spun it, and it didn't have even 1/1000th of an inch. But the one I saw at the trade show that they were putting back on the truck down in Houston that they dropped, I expect it probably has more than 1/1000th of an inch. That makes you sick. If you're used to handling heavy duty expensive shop equipment, to see them picking up, $10,000 brake lathe, putting it on the truck, and it gets away from them, it goes. Makes you want to throw up, if you're somebody that likes that tools and stuff. Okay, a metric micrometer reads in millimeters, and the marks below the revolution line are in increments of what? Anybody know?
0.5 millimeters.
The 10th of an inch.
0.5. Half a millimeter.
Oh, half a millimeter?
Half a millimeter, that's C. Yes, 0.5. Pressure testing, dye penetrant inspection, and magnetic particle inspection are several ways to check for what? You guys ought to know that. Cracks in the cylinder head. Everybody has not had enough coffee. Chelsea, is your coffee about ready out there? All right. Oh, yeah. The camshaft bearings, valve lifters, push rods, rocker arms, and rocker shafts are all components of the what? That's part of the valve train. And typically, if you've got, if you're losing oil pressure in an engine, in other words, if there's something that's been damaged, a lot of the time, because of an oil pump, the cam bearings, it's not any easy way to check those except, we probably should have done that. I didn't even think about it. We probably should have put air pressure in the oil gallery on that Dodge to see if he had pressure loss anywhere. You know what? I didn't even think about that. You guys pull that back apart. Let's see that. See that? I got to look out of Brandon. Hey, we have lots of labor here, and it's all free. Okay. Yeah, that was 13 was a D. Okay, 14. The engine block must be inspected for all the following except. The engine block must be inspected for all the following except. C. Flywheel, flange, and pilot hole condition.
Part of the crankshaft.
Yeah, that's the crankshaft. The engine block doesn't have that. I mean, that's not part of the engine block. Number 15, measuring instrument used to measure cylinder bore, crankshaft main bores, or the large end of the connecting rod is the what? What you gonna measure those with? Huh?
Dowel bore gauge.
What? What are you talking about? Dowel bore gauge. That's what you stick down in the cylinder, right?
Caliper?
Yeah. Yeah, you're basically going to be number 15. That's going to be a C. No, it ain't. You got me confused. You've got this so. Oh, wait a minute. I was thinking at crankshaft. Oh, I read the question wrong. I was a dummy. You were right, and I was wrong. Hey, let me read that again because I think I read it. I wasn't listening to myself when I read it. Have you ever read that? You ever been reading something and that you need to study really bad, and you realize you read the whole paragraph and you didn't even know what you read, and you got to go back and reread it? That's what I just did because I was thinking about 4 or 5 things when I read it. Let's start over and let's not be stupid. The measuring instrument used to measure cylinder bore, crankshaft main bores. Bores are the primary word. That's the key word here. Or the large end of a connecting rod, which is a bore, is the dowel bore gauge. And he is right. He was absolutely correct. Kudos to him because he made me look silly. All right, now you guys got matching?
Yes.
You do. Okay, let's hurry and we'll be through with this before you know it. Number 16. What's used to measure inside or outside linear dimensions? Inside or outside linear dimensions. That's a micrometer. Not hard to read. Number 17. A measuring instrument that uses a spring-loaded plunger and a swing needle gauge to display the measured value. Somebody tell me.
Dowel indicator.
Dowel indicator. Good answer. Okay. Number 18. A measuring instrument used to measure the diameter of a large hole.
Dowel bore gauge.
And that's going to be a J. dowel bore gauge. Okay, a measuring instrument with a fixed jaw and a sliding jaw used for measuring inside and outside diameter and depth.
Caliper.
Ooh, 19D, yeah. You guys all know how to read a caliper? Did we go over that last semester?
Used to use it.
Y'all need to know how to read a caliper, don't you? I've got a whole PowerPoint presentation on that. And it's like 10 slides, but it's really cool. It's got huge, and you can do these when you're teaching. You've got huge, really high resolution close-up pictures of the caliper set at various different, and then you pop that up there and say, okay guys, tell me what the reading is. And they have to scratch around and figure it out. And if it's bigger than life, you don't have to, look at it all that close. And it works real good. Everybody gets really good at it after a while. And then they forget it the next semester. I have to teach them again. All right. If you don't do it, you'll forget it, right? Now let's look at the next one. Measuring tool that expands to the inside diameter of a round opening. 20. That's, well,
Feeler gauge.
The diameter around, that'd be like a valve stem. Basically, they're talking about a small hole gauge, right? That's basically going to be your H. It's an H. 21, a measuring tool used to measure the inside diameter of small openings such as a valve guide, which is what, see, this is crazy. H is basically going to be the answer for that one. And I guess what they were wanting was B, the telescoping gauge, which I described a while ago in great detail and all that. So they usually will have like a split ball gauge or something for measuring, which is what they're talking about here. Let's see, let me go on down here, almost through. Frequently called a thickness gauge, 22. Feeler gauge, okay, you got that? You know what a go, no-go feeler gauge is?
Yeah.
Hey, what is that?
Well, the one we used to use, you slid it into a 50 cal machine gun's headspace, and if it fit, it was a go or something. If it didn't fit, it was a no-go, or vice versa.
What it was is thinner, and then it gets thicker. It starts out at 10 thousandths, and it steps up to 20 thousandths. And so if your tolerance is between 10 and 20, the 10 ought to slide in, but it ought to stop when it hits the 20, okay? We used to check the valve clearances on Volkswagen Rabbits for that. And Chelsea's, she'll surely die over there. She's about to go sleep. Okay. All right, now we got the measuring, let's see, the instrument that allows holes and grooves of various depths to be measured. Now, that's a tricky question, isn't it? That's a depth gauge, basically. And a depth gauge, you know what a depth gauge looks like is it's got a little thing like this right here, and it's got a scale, and then it's got a little thing that comes out the bottom, so you can get your measurements. When you push that through, this comes out farther and you read it. I tell you, we use one every time we do a vehicle inspection. Tread depth gauge. That's what that is, a variation of it, yeah. All right, measuring tools available in 3 types: dial indicator, micrometer, ratcheting, and deflecting beam. Ooh, what is that? That's a torque wrench, yeah, good answer. Measuring tool that indicates the number of degrees a bolt or nut has been turned. You used one. You used one. On that navigator, the one I gave you out of my office drawer. What do you call it? Torque angle gauge, yeah. And that's cool as all get out because you know exactly how many degrees you turn it on. All right. Okay, if I was looking at minutes on a clock, how many minutes on a clock would be 90 degrees?
15, ain't it?
Bingo. 180?
Do what?
180 is how many minutes?
Would it be
6 o'clock.
30. It's 30.
No, well,
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, yeah, you're going all the way around. See, 15 minutes on the clock, you're going, there you go. That's why you're trying to make sure you're awake.
no,
So,
no.
yeah. All right. Did anybody find out what a zeotrope is?
No.
A zeotrope
The zeotrope.
is a strange gas that, and I was trying to read a little bit off of it off the computer. It's something about a strange gas that has no minimum or maximum pressure when a constant pressure or some blah 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 is exerted on it. I don't know, it's something crazy.
Well, you actually gave it the college try, Well, what we did was when we were talking about air conditioners yesterday, the zeotrope. I want to pull that up right here. That's not a word that we use a whole lot. You can talk about that kind of thing all you want to, but zeotrope. Images for zeotrope. No, zoetrope. I misspelled it wrong. No, I didn't.
No, they keep wanting to tell you, did you mean to spell
They
it
keep
like
on to
this?
tell about a zoetrope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Z-O-E. It's almost spelled the same way, but it's a drum of some kind.
You got to demand that you want it spelled this way. Otherwise, they're going to be a pain in the butt.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, they just message you up when a word's that weird and that close, doesn't it? You know. Okay, everybody done. We're through. Let's move out in the shop.